Welcome, I'm your host, Malcolm Gallagher. From our BizVision studios in the UK, you're watching the Alex Kuhn Web Show on the BVTV network. In our constant quest for you here at BVTV to find the best in leadership thinking and approaches, I admit to steering clear of those who feel that to be good leaders, you have to be aggressive. Competitive, yes, but aggressive, no. I've had my share of those in my own work in life in the past, and I was so glad to leave them behind. I firmly believe that a good leader who finds his or her personal leadership strengths can really inspire and motivate. So today, I'm delighted to bring you someone who thinks along similar lines to myself and has helped many people find those best parts of themselves and build strong businesses. So let's start the Alex Kuhn BVT Web Show by saying, welcome, Alex.
And Malcolm, I'm so excited to be here. And your intro, I literally almost want to steal it and share it on other intros that I do on any other place. So I really couldn't agree more with what you said, and just really happy to be here.
Copyright free to you, Alex. Right. Now, this Alex Kuhn BBT Web Show is in our usual Web Show 3 parts. In part 3, he'll give you his proven guidance on how you can build a productive business by tapping into the best parts of yourself. In part 2, he'll explain what resonance marketing is and why you need to be doing it. But in part 1, we'll talk about if leaders are born or created and what you can do to improve your leadership skills. But before we get started on part 1, Alex, give us a brief overview of you and your experience. Go, Alex.
I appreciate it, Malcolm. And I always like to always bring something new to every episode. And I don't want to do any, I don't want to under deliver to this amazing audience you've got here. So, but for me, leadership is more than just an obsession and a passion. It's what I believe is truly the meta skill for anybody, whether it's in business and life, that can really help them get to where they want to go and achieve that vision they have for themselves. And your leadership has always been ingrained in me. I always love to tell this story where my father and I had this great relationship where, we just love to razz on each other. We love to give each other just a hard time in a playful way. And maybe sometimes it grows to a little bit more of a fighting episode. But, my father and I remember I was 9 years old and we were driving home, and my father just kind of joking with me said, "Alex, I think you're a follower." And no, he was clearly joking with me, but as a 9-year-old without having the ability to handle my emotions, got really angry at my dad. And so when I look back on my life, there was no question that I was going to find myself in leadership positions. And I've been able to gratefully been able to do that for many years in my life, whether it was, as a student, and as an athlete, being captain and being that person that was a go-to on teams, to my first job out of college, being a college swim coach and being actually one of the youngest college swim head coaches in the history of the sport, to building some multinational programs, to today where I tell people over 8 years in this entrepreneurial world. The first 3 years, I had 3 businesses that failed. And I believe the reason they failed is because I didn't really tap into the leadership strengths that I possess. And I really tried to follow what everybody else said is, you should be doing this and you should be doing that. And thankfully, I was able to finally get into it and finally figure out what works for me, what is the best leadership zone for me, to ultimately start and sell 2 other businesses before to go into my life's work, which is Born to Lead, and which really is to make sure that those entrepreneurs find the leader that they were born to be so they can leave a legacy.
Brilliant, Alex. Now, let's get into part 1. Are leaders born or can they be bred?
Malcolm, I get this question, and there is so much sometimes like this pushback, like as if it has to be either A or it has to be B. It has to be like you have to be born or you have to be trained. But the reality is this, is that I always love to use this analogy that for anybody who knows who Dr. Dolittle is, if you ever watch the movies, he was the person who could talk to animals. And I want you to imagine that you're walking down and you're just by this lake, and all of a sudden you see this fish in the middle of the water, and it's just jumping up and down and up and down and up and down. And you go over to the fish and you say, what are you doing? Like, I don't understand what you're trying to do. And the fish says to you, well, I'm trying to fly. Can you teach me how to fly? Well, we all know the reality is that we'd say, listen, fish, I'm sorry to say, but you're not meant to fly. You're meant to swim. And I feel what happens is so many people are saying, well, you have to be this type of leader, you have to be this type of leader, or you are a leader or you're not a leader. But the reality is, I believe that leadership is this true DNA, this part of your genetic sequence that you're supposed to lead in a certain way that works best for you, that ultimately allows people to see the best in you and also achieve the best in themselves. So it may be a cop-out answer, but I truly believe that at first you have to understand what leader you were born to be and then work on that to be the best leader you can become.
I'll just knock down a couple of viewers, if you don't mind, Alex, before they sort of said, yes, I know there's such a thing called a flying fish.
There are fly fish. I've gotten that comment there.
Yeah, yeah. We'll knock them out the road, aren't we? Because I like the analogy. Yeah, yes, I do believe, that you can be bred. And that not everybody has to be from a higher echelon to be the leaders. Anybody can come through and be strong if they've got the right coaching. Isn't that correct?
Yes. And I think a lot of times we think of these leaders that are quote unquote the natural leaders as these charismatic, as these otherworldly individuals, whether they're men or women. And sometimes we tend to think of them as, their physical presence, their aura in the room, the way they present themselves. We go, man, that's a leader. But time and time again, there we find that even those people that have those type of characteristics, if they don't really truly tap into what leadership style they were supposed to be, it doesn't matter what their aura is. It doesn't matter what their aggressiveness is. It doesn't matter what you see them as. At the end of the day, everybody, it doesn't matter who you are. We're looking for three things, and I've studied this time and time again. But there's three traits that we all look for in leaders before we even get into what their leadership strengths are. And that is honesty, integrity, and courage. Is this a leader that we trust, right? Is this an honest leader? Integrity. Is this a leader that says when they say they're good at something or they're going to do something, we believe that they're going to actually achieve it? And then finally, courage. Is that leader willing to take a chance on us? Is that leader willing to take a chance on what they believe the vision is there? And they're not just saying it with their words, but they're saying it with their actions. And time again, when you actually see leaders implement these three traits again and again, what we create is consistency. And at the end of the day, anybody, no matter if you're the leader or you're trying to find the right leader, we want leaders that every single day, or I should say the majority of the days, they show up and say who they are and they actually act that way.
I'm totally with you, and I love that those 3 points there as well. But just at the moment, and like you, I've been talking with leaders all over the world, over 250 since March. I find some of them are wallowing now because they're in a new world, this altered world, and it's bemusing and confusing for them. They've never had to be on screen like you and I are doing. They've never had to be able to talk to people in a different way that's so necessary at the moment. Are you finding that leadership will need to change? Skills will need to evolve?
I think no question that we talk about these ideas of these four types of leadership styles that I talk to with all my clients. And at the end of the day, there's one that most of us are natural in. There's one area that we just naturally gravitate towards. But like anybody, right, we don't want to be a leader that has gaps in our skills. So there's no question that there's definitely always skill development. Even if you're not strong in a certain area, you do have to improve those skills. And those could be skills such as public speaking. Those could be skills such as actually planning strategy sessions, right? Management. There's so many different skills that you could actually learn, and some just are going to come more naturally to you than others. But like any great leader that I know, that they're not just going to look at their strengths and work on them consistently. They're going to obviously focus on it, but more importantly, they're going to build either the team around them to support them and or work on those skills themselves to actually be better. And I believe truly going into 2021 and beyond, and because of so many things that we're seeing happening in the world with coronavirus, I really believe that there's this paradigm shift with leadership. And then I truly believe that the things that leaders were getting away with maybe 10 or 15 years ago because they weren't on screen, because they weren't in the public, they're not going to get away with moving forward there. So it's even more imperative now than ever. If you are somebody who really wants to practice those traits of honesty, integrity, and courage and truly develop those skills, I believe, as crazy as it sounds, yes, it's easier to be a leader today than ever just because there's more visibility, but it's also going to be meaning that the people that are going to rise to the top are those that are going to actually practice those paradigm shifting leadership skills, honesty, integrity, courage, and more importantly, finding what works best for you.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. Now, thanks, Alex, for clarifying all that. Let's go to part two. I'm intrigued by what you call resonance marketing and its importance in business success. Can you explain what you mean and how to do it?
It is the most underappreciated aspect of marketing and sales. It's the most underappreciated aspect of leadership. It's the most underappreciated aspect when it comes to achieving one's vision and trying to get, whether it's new clients, new prospects, new followers, however your metrics are in terms of how you're determining the success of your business. And here's what it means is that I break these marketing pieces down. There's three pieces because this will make a little more sense. There's relevance, resonance, and the response. Now, relevance simply means that does this message, does this person, do I want to actually follow them? Is it relevant to me? Right. So first thing is that. Now, the reaction or the response part is they're asking me to buy a product. They're asking me to follow them on social media. They're asking me to do something. Do I want to say yes or no? Now, most marketing programs and most businesses out there, whether it's the Fortune 500 companies all the way down to the solopreneur, they get those two. But it's the resonance part that really creates legacy. It's the resonance that really creates sustainability. And what is resonance? Resonance simply is your ability when that person sees your message or you on screen or your business on screen, that they feel a deep level connection with you. They feel like you get them, they get you. And it's as if you've created this bond that's unbreakable. It's why, even I talk about paradigm shifting leadership, that if you can master this resonance part, that what's going to happen is you're going to create this invisible, deep bond with your clients, with your prospects, with your team members, that no matter what the big companies do or who comes into play, it is almost going to be unbreakable, which ultimately means that you're going to have clients that are going to work with you longer. You're going to have teams that want to stay with you longer and be more productive. And ultimately means you're going to be building a business that truly does leave a legacy.
So how do we do it then?
That's always the big question. How do we do
How
this?
do we do it? Yes,
how do we do it? Simple.
Hey, have we resonated yet?
Yes, yeah. I mean, right before this, like we got on for 5 minutes and we just were chit chatting. I mean, it's a big day, as you said. It's an interesting day or big day in the U.S. However you look at the presidential election, right? I mean,
I just remind people that we're recording this on a very strange day in some ways, but exciting day. It is election day in the USA.
Yes, and
back to you and how to do it.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's not even something I want to talk about because I think honestly, for most people out there, like the resonance piece is actually easier than most people think. And the reason why we complicate it is because we think that because of all the marketing tactics and all the analytics and all the numbers and stuff like that, what really resonates is this, is are you actually putting out, number one, are you putting out a story that is not just your personal story, but more importantly, are you understanding your client and prospect story? Every time I go into a business, every time, it's amazing to me how many times they say, like, how do you guys market? They say, well, here's our story. We tell them our background. We've been in business for 30 years, or I went through this heartache and all these different things. And I say, well, that's great. I love your story, but what's your client story? What's your prospect story?
Yeah.
And it's very hard for them. They're like, well, I mean, Alex, it's very difficult. Some go through this, some go through that. And they don't know. They don't know. So the first thing I would say is simply shift your mindset into worrying less about how people get to know you. And more importantly, how is your business getting to know your client, your prospect, your team member, and their story? And how are you as a business making that dream come true? That to me is resonance. And that's how people, at the end of the day, there's a great quote by Dale Carnegie from How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Right. Yeah.
If you'll make more friends in 2 months getting to know them than you will in 2 years getting them to know you. And that is something that's becoming a lost art in business. But if you're that business and if you're that leader listening to this, and if you can shift your mind instead of worrying about how they're going to get to know you versus how you're going to get to know them, I'm telling you, it's a game changer. And 99.9% of the businesses and business leaders are not going to do it.
Let's move now to part 3, Alex. How to build a big figure business by being you. I'm looking forward to this because I know, Alex, that you don't believe in the aggressive or badass leader like me. So how is it done?
Yeah, I mean, listen, if anybody's watching this on webinar, you're gonna see. Look at me. I'm not this guy that's gonna look like I'm gonna come and scream and yell. I'm not gonna pull off what we think of as I think of the Jack Welch. I think we see this like that's the leader you're supposed to be, the guy who's gonna come in and say, if you're not number one in your section, or you're not the number one in your division, or you're not number one in whatever, you're fired, and you're get the hell out of here. But
Yeah.
listen, I think that's what paradigm shifting leadership is happening today. And so when I talk about people, and this is not about just being, I'm going to be authentic and I'm going to be myself. What it really means is that there's two pieces I look at this. Number one, that if you really are showing up as yourself in your business, ultimately it means that you're going to actually attract the people that you want to work with in your business. And this is particularly for service-oriented businesses, and even more in product-oriented businesses, because at the end of the day, if you look at any commercial, any big business, you'll notice that they're putting people on their commercials. They're putting faces on their commercial. They're letting them lead out front. So naturally, the first thing is like saying, listen, if you're showing up trying to be somebody different, ultimately you're going to attract people that you don't like. They're going to feel it, and ultimately they're not going to buy with you. Even if they buy once, they might want a refund, or they might want to get rid of you. So the first thing is that you've got to ask yourself, how do I want to build a relationship with people? And I always say this is like, what are those three emotional and relational words you want to have with people? And I always tell, for me, I want people to see that I'm compassionate. I want to see people that I'm inspiring. And I want to see people in my drive. And if I have that relationship and I talk to people in my world, whether it's social media or one-on-one conversations or in front of thousands of people at a time, right? If I try to build that relationship every single time, I'm ultimately going to be who I want to be and ultimately attract who I want to be. So that's the first thing. The second thing, here's the thing that I think that most leaders struggle with. And that is that everything they do has a one-to-one relationship. And what do I mean by that? Very simply is that if you ask yourself, hey, I'm doing one-on-one work, okay? It means that literally every time you sell, you got to do it one-on-one here, one-on-one there, one-on-one here. Every business model, it doesn't matter if you're the brand, it doesn't matter if the business is the brand. At the end of the day, you should be always thinking meta, and simply this: how can that one activity I'm doing equate to multiple positive results? And if you can't figure it out, or if you don't know how, then it tells me you're thinking too linearly. Meaning that, like, literally, I have this equation I say is like, listen, if you do this one activity a day, can you find me 4 different areas where it's actually going to improve the business? And if you can't, then we got to go back and find what actually is going to improve the business like that.
That's brilliant, Alex. And look, I've been so much enjoying our conversation, I've forgotten to do something, and that's to remind people that on the screen behind me here is your URL to go along and find out how Alex can help you be as great as he is. Oh, by the way, whilst they're writing that down, you're writing their URL down, Alex, I'll just tell you a quickie about that supposed leader of that other toy company I went to work for back in 1970, a UK company. And 1 week I was top salesman out of the 40 across the UK. And his weekly newsletter said, Gallagher is number one, not Malcolm, by the way. Gallagher is number one this week. I hope he continues this rather than his usual pathetic efforts.
Oh my God. Wow. What a good pump up, and keep going.
I've still got it, and it still motivates me to go and find his gravestone and kick it. Never mind. That you've just given us some brilliant thinking and brilliant inspiration of how to be the great leader. Alex, it's been inspiring meeting you. In this special Alex Kuhn BBT web show, I've been talking to the person who truly knows how to be a successful leader who everyone wants to follow. Thank you, Alex, for a great interview.
Thank you, Malcolm. Loved it.